I stared at my father across a Christmas table packed with 30 relatives when he slammed his wine glass down and said, "Pay for your sister's $93,000 dream wedding, or stop calling yourself part of this family." The room went silent. Then my mother stood up beside him, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Everyone here agrees," she announced. "You owe your sister this." A few people looked away. Others nodded. My sister sat there in tears, carefully avoiding my eyes. The Christmas lights hanging above the dining room blurred for a second as anger rushed through me. Not because of the money, I could afford it. Years of 80-hour work weeks had made sure of that. What stunned me was the entitlement, the demand, the public humiliation. My father had turned family dinner into a trial, and I was the defendant. The smell of roasted turkey suddenly felt sickening. I looked around the table at faces I'd known my entire life. Uncles, aunts, cousins, people who had watched me build my business from nothing. Not one person spoke up for me, not one. My mother folded her arms. My father waited for an answer. The pressure in the room was almost physical. I could hear forks clinking against plates. Someone cleared their throat. Everyone expected a fight. Instead, I took a sip of water. Then I smiled. "Okay," I said quietly. The relief on their faces was immediate. They thought I'd surrendered. They thought the money was already theirs. What none of them knew was that 3 months earlier, I'd discovered something that changed the way I saw my family forever, and at that moment, sitting beneath the glow of Christmas lights while 30 relatives watched me, I realized something important. I wasn't about to buy my sister a wedding. I was about to teach my entire family the most expensive lesson of their lives. My name is Ethan, and for most of my life, my family treated me less like a son and more like a resource. They could tap whenever they needed something. I was the oldest child, the reliable one. While my sister chased dreams and changed careers every year, I worked. When my parents needed help with bills, I paid them. When my uncle's business failed, I quietly loaned money that was never returned. Family called it generosity. I called it loyalty. The problem was that loyalty slowly became expectation. Nobody asked whether I wanted to help anymore. They simply assumed I would. Growing up, my father praised sacrifice but rarely acknowledged achievement. Report cards, promotions, long nights building my company. None of it impressed him for long. The moment I succeeded, the conversation shifted to what I could do for someone else. My sister learned that lesson early. Whenever she made a mistake, someone rescued her. Usually me. I convinced myself that family worked that way. You give without keeping score. But over time, I noticed something uncomfortable. The support only flowed in one direction. When I faced setbacks, nobody showed up. When I celebrated victories, people appeared with requests. My success had become a family asset rather than a personal accomplishment. By that Christmas dinner, I wasn't shocked that they wanted my money. I was shocked that they believed they were entitled to it. And the worst part was that this wasn't the first time they had underestimated me. It was simply the first time I decided not to play along. The weeks after Christmas revealed what my family's loyalty was really worth. At first, the messages sounded polite. My mother would call and leave. Soft voicemails about how much the wedding meant to my sister. My father sent short texts asking when I planned to transfer the money. Neither asked whether I agreed with the demand. They only discussed timing. Then the comments became sharper. At a Sunday lunch, my aunt smiled across the table and asked whether success had made me selfish. The question was delivered gently enough to sound harmless. But the silence that followed told a different story. My cousin started treating me like an outsider. Conversation stopped when I entered a room. Invitations arrived later than everyone else's. Or not at all. Even my sister changed. Whenever we spoke, she talked about venues, flowers, and guest lists as if my payment was already guaranteed. She never thanked me because in her mind, gratitude was unnecessary. One evening, I overheard her laughing with relatives in the kitchen. "He'll cave eventually," she said. The room filled with quiet chuckles. I stood in the hallway, unseen. Something about those words stayed with me. Not because they were cruel, because they were confident. They weren't wondering whether I'd pay. They were counting on it, and every smug glance, every casual assumption, every carefully disguised insult confirmed the same thing. My family believed they knew exactly who I was. They had no idea how much I had already learned about them. The moment everything changed wasn't dramatic. There was no argument, no slammed doors, no explosive confrontation. It happened on a rainy Thursday evening while I was reviewing financial records in my office. My phone lit up again, another voicemail from my mother, 41 by then. I listened to it in silence. She didn't ask how I was doing. She didn't ask whether I was happy. Every word was about the wedding, the family, and what I was expected to provide. When the message ended, I stared out the window at the city lights reflecting off the wet streets below. And suddenly, a pattern I had ignored for years became impossible to miss. Every relationship in my family came with a bill attached. Love was conditional, respect was transactional. Acceptance depended on compliance. The wedding wasn't the real issue. It was simply the latest test. For years, I had convinced myself that keeping peace was worth the cost. But the truth was staring me in the face. No amount of money would ever buy genuine appreciation from people who viewed generosity as obligation. That night, I opened a folder on my computer containing documents I had quietly collected over the previous months. Promises, emails, financial records, evidence, nothing illegal, nothing secret, just facts. For the first time, I stopped thinking about how to satisfy my family and started thinking about how to protect myself. A strange calm settled over me. The pressure disappeared, because I finally understood something they didn't. I wasn't trapped. I had options. And once I made my decision, the outcome of their wedding and our relationship was no longer in their hands. Once I made my decision, I stopped reacting and started preparing. Years of running a successful company had taught me a simple lesson. Emotions create mistakes, but records tell the truth. Instead of arguing with relatives, I documented everything. Every text message demanding money. Every voicemail implying I owed my sister a wedding. Every email mentioning family expectations. I created a timeline and organized months of conversations into folders. The process felt less like preparing for a fight and more like conducting an audit. What my family didn't realize was that I wasn't just their son or brother. I was also the trustee of a family investment account my grandfather had established years earlier. The role required financial oversight, documentation, and annual reporting. Most relatives ignored the paperwork because they assumed everything would continue as it always had. While reviewing those records, I noticed something interesting. The same people pressuring me for money had repeatedly ignored financial responsibilities they had previously agreed to in writing. Nothing criminal, nothing scandalous, just a long history of broken commitments and selective memory. So I met quietly with the family's attorney and accountant. I asked questions, requested copies of agreements, verified obligations, collected facts. No threats were made. No accusations were raised. When relatives called, I remained polite and non-committal. The more pressure they applied, the calmer I became. Because while they were planning a wedding based on assumptions, I was building a case based on evidence. And evidence has a way of surviving long after emotions fade. The payoff arrived 6 weeks before the wedding. My parents had organized another family gathering, convinced it would finally pressure me into writing the check. The atmosphere felt strangely familiar. The same dining room, the same relatives, the same expectation that I would eventually give in. This time I arrived carrying a slim folder. Nothing more. After dinner, my father casually asked when the wedding funds would be transferred. Several heads turned toward me. I placed the folder on the table and slid copies of the documents across the polished wood. Then I said 3 calm words. Before we continue. The room grew quiet. Inside were signed agreements, financial records, and written commitments connected to the family investment account. The documents showed thousands of dollars in unpaid obligations that several relatives, including my parents, had ignored for years while demanding money from me. No accusations were necessary. The paperwork spoke for itself. People who had spent months calling me selfish suddenly found themselves explaining missing payments, broken promises, and forgotten responsibilities. I watched expressions change one by one. Confidence became discomfort. Discomfort became silence. My sister flipped through the pages without saying a word. My mother's face lost color. My father stopped making eye contact. For the first time, the spotlight wasn't on me. It was on the people who had tried to use public pressure as leverage. I never raised my voice. I never insulted anyone. I simply informed them that no wedding funding would be provided until every outstanding obligation was settled. Then I stood up and left. Behind me, the room erupted into conversations they could no longer avoid, and my phone, for the first time in months, became remarkably quiet. The fallout wasn't immediate. For several days, there was only silence. No angry group messages, no emotional voicemails, no relatives calling to lecture me about family duty. Then reality began settling in. A few cousins reached out privately. They admitted they had never seen the documents and had simply accepted my parents' version of events. Others stayed quiet, embarrassed by how quickly they had taken sides. My sister postponed parts of the wedding budget and scaled back plans that had depended on money she never actually had. For the first time, she was forced to make decisions based on her own resources rather than assumptions about mine. My parents reacted differently. Their anger slowly gave way to something less comfortable: accountability. People who had once praised their public demands started questioning why they believed they were entitled to my success in the first place. The biggest consequence, however, wasn't financial. It was relational. Some family ties weakened, a few disappeared entirely. But the relationships that remained became more honest than they had ever been. And that is why this story matters. Most people will never be asked to fund a $93,000 wedding, but many know what it feels like to be valued, more for what they provide than for who they are. The real risk isn't losing money. It's losing your sense of self while trying to earn approval. That keeps moving further away. The moment I stopped paying for acceptance was the moment I learned my worth didn't require anyone else's permission. A year later, I barely think about the wedding. Not because I forgot what happened, but because it no longer controls me. The wedding eventually took place, smaller, simpler, and funded by the people who wanted it most. My sister and I aren't as close as we once were, but our conversations are finally honest. There are no hidden expectations lurking beneath every phone call. My relationship with my parents changed too. The distance between us never completely disappeared, yet something healthier replaced the old dynamic. They learned I had boundaries. I learned that enforcing them wasn't cruelty. The greatest change happened within me. For years, I believed peace came from keeping everyone happy. Now I understand that real peace comes from respecting yourself enough to say no when no is the truthful answer. I still help people. I still believe in generosity. But generosity given freely feels very different from generosity demanded under pressure. Looking back, I don't feel victorious because I exposed anyone or proved anyone wrong. I feel satisfied because I finally stopped measuring my worth through other people's approval. That Christmas dinner was supposed to be the moment my family cornered me. Instead, it became the moment I reclaimed myself. Sometimes the strongest revenge isn't making someone suffer for what they did. It's refusing to keep sacrificing yourself so they can keep doing it. And the quietest no I ever spoke ended up becoming the loudest statement of my life.